As we move closer to the 2024 NFL Draft, we are back with another Six Rings and Football Things Prospect podcast. If you're watching, you see Mike Cadlick and myself, Andy Jumbo Hart. If you're
Hi.
listening, you'll hear Mike Cadlick right there, and
What's
myself,
up?
Andy Jumbo Hart. We are here, as we have been doing all along the way, to talk about positions, prospects, groups, and the talent level available on April 25th, 26th, 27th for the Patriots and the 31 other NFL teams. Today, for the first time, we're going to do two positions because, quite frankly, neither of these positions deserve their own podcast.
A single player in the two groups might deserve his own podcast. Other than that, not really.
That's probably accurate. And that Mike is referring to Brock Bowers. That's where we're going to begin, is the tight end position. But before we jump into Bowers and then the significant drop off to whoever the number 2 tight end is, let's talk just generally from a Patriots perspective, because I do think this is a potential need, whether it's a target based on the depth of the prospects, I don't know. But, the position, Mike Gesicki gone. You re-sign Hunter Henry. You bring in Austin Hooper, who is a capable veteran, journeyman, whatever you want to talk about, number 2 tight end. I personally believe they upgraded the position with those two guys over Gesicki and Hunter from last year. But you don't really have a young developmental tight end. You don't really have a third tight end. I think you'd love to. We lived the life post Gronk where they didn't really invest, didn't really have a guy coming through the pipeline.
Position was awful for so long after him. Yeah.
And that's where I feel, and they did swing various times at like day 3 picks, the Ryan Izzos and whatever those guys. They had the Dalton Keene, Devin Asiasi year.
Yep.
They didn't hit on it. I do think, in an ideal world, you probably add a young developmental tight end that you hope in a year or two is at least a number 2 tight end. So you're not looking to always fill 2 slots kind of every along the way. But that gets us into, there's not a lot of guys that I'm sure are even NFL talents in this class.
Yeah, and that's how it happened, like you said, because the cupboard was bare for so many years, and then they swung big in 21. They signed Jonnu and Hunter, I think, to the same 3-year deals, but then got rid of Jonnu Smith, bring in Mike Gesicki on the 1-year deal, and so then they were, it was a ghost town until they re-signed Henry. And then you mentioned it too, Austin Hooper's here, but he's only here on a 1-year deal, and he's another veteran. So really, you're going to have to, hit it again in free agency next year if you don't, attack the position in the draft this year. And so I think it's one of those, I know it's overused, but it is kind of a sneaky need because, when you're looking at your 1 to 53, it's like, oh, well, we have 2 guys who are veterans and are capable, but there's really nothing under that. And so we'll talk about it. And it's really, in my opinion, it's Brock Bowers and then a big gap between everyone else. And there's guys here with potential, and there's guys who, are like freak athletes, but didn't put up the numbers and things like that, who you can bring in and try and work with. But yeah, I do think they're going to have to take a swing in one of the later rounds here to try and fill out the room.
Okay, so let's get into the draft. So first of all, I think we would all riot if they ever thought of taking Brock Bowers at number 3 overall.
Right.
He is going to go in the top half of the first round, I feel pretty safe saying. He probably could be a consideration, I guess, if you traded down the Vikings trade, for example. I don't want to get into too many, but if you were at 11 and you're doing...
No, you have to give the comp. You have to tell us all the compensation so we can grade your draft. Yeah.
If you're at 11 and you're doing Elliott Wolf, best player available, is there a chance you look at Brock Bowers? Sure. Now, the one thing I'll say about Brock Bowers, before we get specifically into his skills, I feel like Kyle Pitts and Brock Bowers are tied together because Kyle Pitts went 6, I believe, to the Falcons. Fourth to the Falcons. Similar, like great production, made that offense click at Florida, was seen as sort of a freak that was going to just be the next, I don't even know, Kelsey Gonzalez, move tight end, and he has
like a do-it-all guy at tight end and someone who would be like the, the A1 of your offense. And he hasn't done that so
the
far.
Centerpiece. And he just hasn't really done it. He hasn't lived up to it. Now, he obviously hasn't had a quarterback, so I don't know if he could be a late career developer depending on, Kirk Cousins and whatever happens there with that offense. But I do think the Kyle Pitts failure might be a strong word, but failure in Atlanta is going to affect potentially Brock Bowers, because Brock Bowers is interesting. So 6'3", 243, 3-year kind of guy, 3 years of like 60 catches each,
Great production. Yep.
centerpiece of the Georgia offense. Obviously, they're Georgia. They're good. They're playing in big games. They're playing in the SEC. They're playing good defenses. I came up with a new phrase for myself personally for this.
Okay.
I called him boringly good. Like there's
Yeah.
like nothing flashy about it. And you almost question, like, and this is where we get into racism. And, I know racism's been big the last couple of days, because if you like Caitlin Clark and you don't like the Bayou Bambi, you're racist, whatever. Like Paul Pierce was stunned that some white girl beat some black girls. Like there's a lot of race going on. So I'll just say it. Like you look at the kind of stockily built white tight
the powder
end.
white tight end. Yeah, exactly.
And the only thing that wows you is when he gets up and it's a first down, and then he gets up again and it's another first down. Like, I feel like that's what's wowing. Now, and I'm not saying he's not athletic. Like, there's throws outside his frame where he catches it.
He's nasty. He's nasty. Let's call it like it is. Like, and I get it. And I'll cut you off right there, because, and not that I don't disagree, or not that I disagree, because I kind of do agree. Sometimes it doesn't look great, but sometimes it didn't look great for, and I'm not comping him to this, but a guy like Gronk either. Sometimes it looked goofy when Gronk would do something. And
absolutely.
He didn't look like he could run, and he would kind of fall all over himself, but he still picked up 6-7 yards and a first down. And sometimes I see that kind of stuff with Brock Bowers. Like, he is fast. He doesn't look fast, but he is fast, and he does break tackles, and he does have great field vision. Like, you'll see him cut to the sideline and then cut back in and get another, 8 to 10 yards, because he sees something that the defender might not, or he sees that he outgained him on, has leverage on him or something. And so, I think, again, I said it before, but there is a gap between him and the next guy. I think he was that focal point of the Georgia offense. And to do this against SEC defenses for 3 straight seasons, I mean, there's not really, I don't have much of a knock on his game, aside from the fact that, like you said, boringly a good player might be the best way to put it, because he's just good and there's no real flash. He's just a really good football player.
And, you bring up Gronk, and I agree with you. Like, there were times with Gronk, you're like, it looks a little weird. But when it looks a little weird and he's breaking a tackle and then dragging another guy 20 yards or whatever, the production, the end result is awesome. And for the Georgia Bulldogs, the end result was awesome. It's funny though, like, I think there is some Aaron Hernandez to his game. He's sort of that slot, because even Hernandez wasn't super flashy. He'd cut back and make a guy miss, and you're like, he doesn't look like Tyreek Hill cutting back. He doesn't. Or, Travis Kelce has it to him. He just kind of smoothly cuts back, lets that first tackler run by, and then he picks up another 6 yards. And I think Brock Bowers, that's who I would compare him to right now. If there was like an upside for Brock Bowers, it's the Travis Kelce, who, I always say this, I watch playoff games, and especially lately, that the focal point of the offense is Travis Kelce. And yet somehow, early in the third quarter, Travis Kelce has 10 targets with 9 catches.
And he's wide open on every single play.
What the hell are you guys doing on defense? There's one guy you got to stop. Stop him first. Make some. And I think Brock Bowers has some of that to his college game, and that's what you're hoping projects to the next level.
And you mentioned that him in the slot too. I don't have the number in front of me, but when I was looking at it, he lined up significantly in the slot versus in line. And so he is that sort of wide receiver, fringe, tight end type of guy.
And I remember seeing this. I'm pretty sure, like Hernandez, he's taken some handoffs out of the backfield. He has.
2 seasons ago, he had 3 rushing touchdowns.
So
last year he had 1 rushing touchdown. He has a couple carries under his belt too.
You get with the right group, scheme, offense, players around you, creativity. I think there's some things he can probably do there.
I'm pretty sure, for what it's worth, Alex Van Pelt did some tight end handoffs in his time in Cleveland. Harrison Bryant was carrying the ball a lot.
So are you advocating for the Patriots to draft Brock Bowers in the first round?
I think they should trade up to number 2 and draft Brock Bowers. Yes. Yes, bingo. Do it.
Do you believe Brock Bowers will be better than Kyle Pitts?
I don't know. And that's what I wanted to get to. Of course, I say I don't know, right? But
why do I have you on?
Yeah, seriously. No. I think his stock may drop a little bit because of what happened with Kyle Pitts, but and we're going to talk about it on our One-Off Wednesday podcast this week. That shouldn't matter. They're 2 different players. They're 2 different situations. I don't think just because Kyle Pitts hasn't unfolded the way he should have in the league that you should necessarily look down on Brock Bowers. And so I'm going to say no because I still am a Kyle Pitts believer. And that may or may not have to do with him being on my dynasty fantasy football team and me having taken him like 8 overall a couple years ago. But regardless, I do think he's a really good player. I don't think it's been his fault that he hasn't succeeded in Atlanta. And I do think Kirk Cousins coming in, seeing what Cousins has done in the past, especially with a guy like TJ Hawkinson over the last couple seasons, like I think he can revitalize his career. But long story short, I think both of them are great players. I think both of them at some point down the line will be fringe like top 5, top 10 tight ends in the NFL at any given time. So
okay, so we got Brock Bowers out of the way. He's a really good player, probably gonna have a productive career. Feels like a safe pick. I don't know how good he's gonna be, but like a safe, he'll be in the league in 7 years making plays for someone kind of guy, even if he's on a second team or whatever.
Sure.
Who's your number 2 tight end?
I got Ja'Tavion Sanders from Texas. Part of that three-headed monster, him, A.D. Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, and kind of, I don't want to say a ball magnet, but a guy who's just reliable, can, catch the ball. 45 catches for 682 yards, 2 touchdowns this season. They split him out a lot at wide receiver too. And he is also fast like Bowers. And so I'm not too privy on his ability as a blocker, but I know that he's a really good receiving tight end. And he's a guy who, even though I look at the gap between Bowers and the rest of them, he's my number 1. I would say pretty strongly in that second group. I think he's a really good player. And I think I'll probably put him in like a fringe second round. I'll probably put him in the second round, see him in the second round. So I like his game. And long story short, I think he's a good receiver, and he'll be tested as a blocker. But I like Ja'Tavion Sanders number 2.
Yeah, I like him. I don't love him. I think second round's probably fair. I do think he's the second best tight end, and I wonder if that drives his stock up a little bit because somebody wants to snatch the next one. Like, okay, Bowers is gone. We kind of need to leave this draft with a tight end. We're going to overdraft this guy by a half a round or a round or whatever the hell it is. A 2-year player there. I saw a comparison to Njoku. I don't think he's as athletic, but I do think in a way there is some of that upside. And Njoku took some time to develop. I thought he was a real underachiever until he came on in the last couple of years. And I think there'll probably be some of that with Sanders. I'm not sure just roll him out there and he's going to catch 55 balls. First of all, tight end can be a tough transition for even the good ones. I mean, TJ Hawkinson took a couple years. I think Cole Kmet is coming into his own. I think he's going to be one of the better tight ends in football, and it's taken a couple years. There's not, a lot of guys that do like the Gronk. I'm just going to come in year 1, year 2, be like a dominant all-pro type tight end. So I think Sanders is in that mold. The next guy that I liked was Cade Stover out of Ohio State. 6'4", 247. Decent production over the last 2 years. I think like 80 something catches for 1,000 yards. Another 4'6" guy. I think he runs well enough to play the position. Definitely some run after catch ability. You see, I think he has upside there. He's a former linebacker, so he's a little bit like raw. I think he's still
that's my one word for Stover's raw. Like, good blocker, tough guy.
And I like that.
Developmental player. Again, I don't see him as like a 8,000-9,000 yard receiver ever in the league, but a dependable like third option in an offense that can, do the nitty-gritty stuff and obviously help as a blocker. So no, I like Stover. He was supposed to come out last year, and I think I did more research on him last year than I did this year, and then he ended up going back. And so I liked him early. He helped his cause. I mean, he brought in another 41 catches for like 600, and I think he had 7 touchdowns this year. So, helped his cause a little bit by going back. But yeah, he's raw. He's a guy who, talk about the Patriots bringing in a developmental guy. I can see a guy like that on day 2 or 3 for them.
Yeah, if you could tell me I could get Stover in day 3 somewhere in there, and some of these might play into the trade scenarios with the Patriots if you're adding picks. And I'm not just talking about number 3. I know you've done some mock drafts where they add picks in like the 3rd round or they trade down in the 2nd, whatever, move around, add picks. First of all, tight end is a position that I think, we added an extra pick. Where would we want to use this little bit of extra currency? Tight end might be a spot.
Definitely.
Then we get like a Cade Stover.
I'll give you my third.
Yeah, let's just go back and forth.
Yeah, Ben Sinnott from Kansas State. Another project, but I like him better than Stover because I feel like he does a lot of things well. Like, he can
kind of a fullback, right? Like fullback, tight end, hybrid, whatever you want to call it.
Very good. So like, he's a good blocker. He's athletic. He can catch the ball. 6'4", 245. So he's got like a good frame for a tight end. He doesn't really need to grow into anything. I kind of like him where he is. And that's the advantage I like too, is that he can play fullback. So like you can move him all around. But that's also a guy who, similar to Stover, and we talk about the position not being great. Like I don't see a perennial Pro Bowler in I don't see a perennial Pro Bowler in anybody really other than Brock Bowers. So like these are guys who I don't want to consider them on day 2, day 3, maybe. But like, again, long story short, I like Sonata. I like what he can do. I like that he can do it all. But he's another project, just like a guy like Stover is.
Yeah, I didn't hate him. Again, another 4'6" guy. And so much, he's definitely a project. I even put like, he looks to me like a practice squatter who like hangs around for a year and then maybe a year later you get some production out of him because of the combination of versatility, but also like, where am I using him out of the gates? Like, yeah, he's versatile, but I'm not sure I even have a spot where I need him even to be like a big special teamer. Something that to keep an eye on. And I don't know if you've done any research in this, but we're talking about tight ends. We're talking about running backs. We're going to be talking about linebackers. And I haven't really thought this through. I'm throwing this out here on the fly here.
All right.
Like the new kickoff rules. What types of people are going to be lining up in that little zone?
Yeah, that's above my pay grade right now anyway.
But I feel like that could be tight ends and linebackers
100%.
and fullbacks and versatile bodies, athletes.
It's going to change it. And you saw the second that the day after the rule was passed, the Steelers signed Cordero Patterson for their kick return. Like,
absolutely.
It's going to change.
There will be more touchdowns this year. No doubt.
There will be more touchdowns. There will be rosters will be built differently, whether you notice it or not.
Yep.
On cut down day 1 to 53. So that's a good point too for guys like that who are special teamers and who can play all 4 downs on defense or offense, and then also be out there on the special teams.
So I'm just throwing that out there because I feel like these bodies, he's an athlete with some size, can run a little bit. I feel like those people are going to be involved in that, but that's a different topic for a different day.
No, it's a good point though to tie in for sure.
Jared Wiley. Is it Wiley or Willie? Wiley Coyote from Texas and then TCU, which I love that. I've started to really enjoy when you look up a guy and it's like, well, he spent 3 years here. Like there's one guy, he had 3 different schools, 2 years at each school. I think I'm running the running backs.
It's the running backs. When I was doing my running backs for this pod earlier, it's the transfer portal era and they play everywhere. And I like it. It's different. It's fun. I don't think it's a good or a bad thing, but it's funny. You look at their stats and you look at like what they've done everywhere. And everyone is broken up. It's like redshirt season, transfer, this, that. And it's like, wow, you went everywhere.
And then there's some guys like they do nothing somewhere and then they pop up as like 1,000-yard back somewhere else or whatever. Like, oh, yeah, what was the last coaching staff? Why didn't they play him? But Wiley, 6'6", 249, 90 catches over 5 years. So it's not 90 catches over a year or 2 years. 4.62. I feel like all these tight ends run in the 4.6s. I think they're all
the same. That's my thing with them. They're all pretty much the same.
He is just a guy. He's got good body control, obviously good length at 6'6". I don't think he's a strong guy. He's kind of a long move tight end. I'm not sure how you'd use him. He might have a little Gesicki to him, quite honestly. Which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It used to be a good thing with you. Now it's a bad thing.
It really threw me off this year. I like him. Good dude, good player as a receiver, but something did not click here. That's for sure.
Yeah, it just didn't. I told you. But when he's got hands.
He got in. Yeah, I told you.
Yep, absolutely. Wiley, I like his hands. He's smooth. He looks like a guy that you could get in the middle to latter part of the draft that it wouldn't stun me if he could find a role as a number 2 tight end on a team and, catch 35 balls, 40 balls, somewhere in there. I don't know exactly.
Yeah. So looking at, where I have these guys ranked and a little, not really behind the scenes, but how the sausage is made and how we do this is I do my top 5 and then I do a bunch of honorable mentions. And I have Wiley in an honorable mention. We talked about my first 4. My 5th is Theo Johnson from Penn State. And
I got him.
I look at these guys and I think it's probably the 3rd time I've said it now, but it stresses what this position looks like to me. Like there isn't much of a gap between 5 and the rest of them. Like this is kind of a bunch of dudes right now for me because again, it's really Bowers, some upside with Sanders, and then the rest of them. And then it's kind of hard to differentiate from there. But regardless, Theo Johnson, a guy who I had him in a mock draft that we talked about a couple weeks ago. And you laughed at me because he hasn't surpassed 350 yards in a season. Like, he doesn't put up the stats. He doesn't have a ton of production. But we talk about projects. We talk about guys who you just want to bring in and see what he has. He tested out the freaking building at the combine. He ran a 4.57, 39.5-inch vertical, 10'5" broad jump. All were second among tight ends. So, like, he's probably the freak athlete of the bunch outside of, Brock Bowers, who didn't test, but he's different.
Right.
But I like bringing in a guy like Theo Johnson to just see what he can do. Again, 6'6", 260, good frame, and he's fast with it. Like, it's not a frame where he's, big and awkward. Like, and this is a different topic for a different day, but like, we're talking about this kid on NC State, the big power forward. I can't think of his name now for the basketball team.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to DJ Burns. Everyone wants DJ Burns to like play football all of a sudden. Yep. And how they do that with guys like Antonio Gates. Like, you put DJ Burns on a football field, he's not going to run like Theo Johnson does, right? And so I like him as a project. You bring him in and see what he can do.
Yeah, I wrote looks the part. Had some production, mild production, obviously has the numbers. Right. I wrote meh all around Jag. Okay. Like, he's not without ability. Mm-hmm. And I think you're right. Like, the 5th tight end versus the 8th tight end.
Exactly.
All of them will probably be in the league somewhere around 3 to 5 years and then be out of the league, because I don't know that many of them have staying power. One or two will probably, bubble up from the group. Again, he's in that mix. And I think you have to talk. If you need a tight end, you have to talk yourself into one of those guys and liking him probably more than you should. Okay, we need to talk about another guy who pretty sure you had in one of your mock drafts.
Okay.
And he's had a weird, I don't know if cult following is the word, but people seem to have fallen in love with Tip Ryman, the kid out of Illinois.
Yeah.
And I don't really see it. I don't really know why. He's a blocker, I guess. Like, great.
Yep. He's a guy who will come in and block and catch a couple passes and,
I mean, he's big.
Yeah.
He's like 270. That's great.
But can he run? Like, you have the numbers in front of you, right?
He actually ran a 4.6 something.
Okay.
And he did 28 reps on the bench, so he's stronger. Mm-hmm. So he's that closer to a tackle than a move tight end type. I think what did he do? He had 2 seasons of 19 catches or something. Like, he's not.
Yeah, see, that doesn't impress me. I'm sorry. And I know that I just said it about Theo Johnson, but like, you have to test out of the building to get to make me look at you. And I know that
he did 28 reps. You don't like those?
It's fine, but like, I want you to play tight end for me. I don't want you to block for me. I want you to go make nasty catches and, be reliable on 3rd down, and like, to put up 20 catches. Like, it's great. And, maybe you bring him in and maybe he blows you away elsewhere, but you're right. He has kind of come on as a 3rd day Patriots pick or a 3rd day tight end that, might impress, but I haven't really seen it from what I've seen.
I wonder if it's just because he's kind of a blocker and that separates him from these other guys we're talking about who are all kind of mediocre move tight ends. So like, hey, this guy's big and strong, and that puts him in a category all his own, I guess.
Yeah. And so, and earlier too, I'm going to throw out another name that, because earlier we were talking about quarterbacks, we were talking about Kyle Pitts throwing off Brock Bowers, and how don't look at those types of things. Don't look at the jersey. Don't look at the school. And I'm going to do the exact opposite here. Eric All, Iowa, tight end U. It's tight end U. They're all nasty from there. You talk about Hawkinson and Noah Fant and George Kittle, and they're always from there. And I just think if Eric All was a Hawkeye, he's probably going to be a pretty good tight end no matter where you pick him. So keep an eye out for that guy as a potential Patriot as well down the line.
Yeah, I don't disagree. That's one of those.
That is like the one I'm like, okay, fine, I'll take it, because he's like that. Or they're like that, rather.
And I think they're well coached. I also think in a weird way they're well coached in an offense that doesn't allow them to do a lot. So then they 100%. Have upside in the next level.
Yep.
So I don't hate that idea. Okay. Any other tight ends you want to talk about, or guys you want to? If you had to pick a Patriot, is there one you'd pick right now for the Mike Kadlick star Patriot tight end pick?
I guess Ben Sinnott. I think he's a day 2, day 3 guy that they could bring in and make up as a project and come in behind either Hunter Henry or what's his name?
And the versatility.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Back a little bit. Maybe that helps him.
And he's a little bit more ready, I think, than some of the other guys. Like, there's a little bit less development to have to do, which helps when you have Austin Hooper on only a 1-year deal.
Okay, so let's trend to the running back position.
There we go.
Which, like the tight end position, isn't very good. In fact, You could argue it's worse, and I'm going to
I
use
think it is
ESPN
worse.
voice because there's no one going in the first round.
Yeah, nothing.
There's just
The only one
nothing.
I could see, and I'm joking, but I could see Jim Harbaugh taking like Blake Corum at pick 5 just because
Okay,
it's
let's start
Harbaugh.
with Blake Corum then,
All right,
because
fine.
I don't know if he's the best,
He's
but
not.
it's a weird list
It is.
of a bunch of guys who haven't had a ton of carries, haven't had a ton of production, maybe
Yep.
switched positions, like whatever the reasoning. And then you have Blake Corum, who's like 2-time
A
1,000
beast.
yards,
Yep.
almost 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons. Like
27 touchdowns last year.
right, like gross touchdown numbers. And I said boringly productive earlier for Bowers. I think Blake Corum's got a little bit of that because I forgot the number, but he had like only 12 touchdowns that are over 5 yards. Like every
Oh,
touchdown he
interesting.
has are
Okay.
under 5 yards. But
Mhm.
that's how they played. And this gets into the
Right.
JJ McCarthy discussion and
Yep.
narrative. But I actually think he has a little bit more burst and ability than maybe
Yeah.
he's given credit for. I don't think he's just a 5 yards in a cloud of dust kind of running back. And I'm going to make a comparison. And this
Okay.
isn't meant to be talent or production or upside. Why are you making funny faces?
I almost ended the recording.
Jesus Christ. You so didn't want to hear what I had to say. You were just going to
No,
end the recording.
no, I all of a sudden I saw, are you sure? And I was like, no, I am not sure. I do not want to have to do this again.
Blake Corum reminds me a little bit of Emmitt Smith, who I always thought was kind of
Okay.
boring and behind a good line would do his job and not going to dance around. You know, there were sort of the comparisons with like Barry Sanders and different players of the time. And he's got a little like put him behind a good line. And I think Blake Corum would probably have a pretty good season. Like I
Yeah.
think he's a solid running back. He's not Bijan. I'm not like building my offense around him. He's not any of those guys because he's not big. He's 5'8",
He's
205.
5'8". He's tiny. I
But
just think he's a gamer. Like
I do too.
that's what I like about him. He's just good at football. Like again, you talk about the production, like back-to-back seasons of 18 plus touchdowns, unanimous All-American. Like doesn't care that he's 5'8", and he's just gonna try and run through you as best as he can. And more often than not, in the Big Ten, he was able to do it. So like
Right.
that's enough for me to take a chance on a guy. And I mean, obviously, we're talking, or I try and at least talk about these a little bit through a Patriots lens. Like you have Ramondre Stevenson, you have Antonio Gibson. Why not add Blake Corum to the room as a guy who can develop behind Ramondre Stevenson? Like I'm fine with taking a shot at that on day 2 or day 3 with this guy because I do think that I do like what he's done in a good conference, in a ground and pound conference in the Big Ten. Like having that type of production, that means you're a good football player. I mean, you talk about all the Wisconsin guys, right? Like they did it in that conference. I think Blake Corum can be a pretty good player on the next level. And again, I use the word gamer because exactly what you just said. Like he's not necessarily very flashy. You just put him in a good system, and he's gonna get you what he has to in a football game. So
yeah, I kind of like him. And stop me if you've heard this before, but I think running backs sneaky need for the Patriots. You have Ramondre Stevenson going in the final year of his contract. I do believe they want to extend him, but even if they extend him, if they're gonna do the Cleveland Browns offense, as Alex Van Pelt has talked about, well, that's built around multiple running backs.
Right.
And if they're going to run the ball as much as Alex Van Pelt has sort of said they might, Blake Corum might be a nice addition to the Gibson Stevenson. Now, the one thing I'll say about, I feel like I have no idea where the running backs are going. Like I just don't.
Me too.
I don't know when the first one will come off the board. I don't know if there'll be a run or if they'll all be looked at some mediocre group that everybody's like, I'll get one of the Jags later just to add depth to my. So that's, if you told me Blake Corum goes in the 40s, I'd probably say too high.
Yeah.
But if you tell me he goes in the 90s, I'd say, well, I think you just got a good football player at, the 3rd round, end of the 3rd round, something like that. So, alternate. Throw a name out there. Who you like?
So I'll give you my number 1 guy, and it's Jonathan Brooks from Texas. 1,300 or 1,100 yards last season. 10 touchdowns. Texas offense was just really good all around, and he was one of them. A growing RBU down there in Austin because obviously they had the 2 guys last year in Bijan and Roschon Johnson, and Jonathan Brooks was in the pipeline behind them, and he came in and played pretty well last year. I think that he has good vision. He wasn't great in the passing game, but I think that he's a guy who, like most running backs, can kind of learn that and learn that. I guess learn that position and be relatively dependable as long as you have the hands for it. So I just think he's a good player overall, and I have him at number one because I think he's probably the most pro ready in the group. I think you can plug him in and give him carries almost immediately. So
And
Jonathan Brooks from Texas is my number one.
he's sort of the opposite end of the spectrum of Blake Corum, in that Corum had whatever 800 touches or whatever at Michigan. This is a guy with like 100 and something carries last year in his breakout year.
Less tread on the tires, though, in a position that they wear out quick. So get him in where you can and get his carries in while you can.
Okay, so I'm gonna bring up where do I want to go next? Let's go a guy that I kind of like, and I don't know if other people do.
Why are you laughing?
What?
Why are you laughing?
I don't know, because Braylon Allen out of Wisconsin. You mentioned Wisconsin running backs earlier, and as much as I have acknowledged that all football is based around the quarterback position, there is still part of me that likes old school football, power football, big running backs, fullbacks, that whole thing. And Allen is a big running back. Now, I'm not sure he always knows it. I think he pitter-patters sometimes, thinking he could be more than a big back. He also reminded me a little bit, and this is obviously, I'm being very generous with my comparisons. I had Emmitt Smith earlier.
Yeah, seriously. We're just throwing Emmitt Smith comps out like they're nothing. Let's see.
Well, if we're going to be honest, the running backs are so boring. We need to fluff up this podcast by using other big names to make it sound cooler. Braylon Allen is kind of a poor man's Derrick Henry to me. Like, I see some style.
So we have Derrick Henry and Emmitt Smith in the class now.
Pretty good. Pretty good class.
Seriously.
Who said there's not good running backs? And what I mean by it is Derrick Henry's capable of those long runs once he gets moving to that second level. And Braylon Allen does that. Like, he doesn't always look like a power back at the line of scrimmage, but then when you see linebackers, safeties, corners try to tackle him 6, 8, 7 yards downfield, then he looks like a big back because they don't. He breaks arm tackles. He makes some plays. He had a couple 1,200-yard seasons like Blake Corum, 3 straight years with double-digit touchdowns. And if I'm looking for, so you have, again, Patriots perspective. If you have Ramondre Stevenson, who is a 3-down back, can do it all if you want him to, could rush for 1,200 yards or catch 70 balls. And you have Antonio Gibson, former wide receiver, who's, I think a lot of people are slotting into sort of that traditional 3rd-down back role. I don't hate the idea of a guy like Braylon Allen as a power back, as like he can tap in and help you out with Stevenson, but then passing situations, Gibson taps him out. I know it didn't work with Kevin Harris, another bigger type back, or hasn't worked. I know he's still on the roster, and I still kind of like him.
Yeah, you love him, but it's
not really working. Yeah, I might have to just kind of move on. So if I want to move on, I'll move on to Braylon Allen.
All right, I like it, and I like the pedigree. I like the Wisconsin running back. Like it's kind of like Iowa in that, like tight end RBU type vibes from there. So yeah, it works for me, and it works like having that type of production, knowing that you can run like that. Yes, it's the NFL versus college, but it kind of gives you like a confidence, I guess, as a back where you can just, behind a good offensive line, you can go get yours. Another guy I'll throw out there then, since we're just playing the ping pong game, is USC's Marshawn Lloyd. He was good. He's my RB2. He's quick. He's fast. He breaks a ton of tackles. I have the number in front of me. I think 95 career missed tackles, and 47 of them on just 115 carries last season. So even if you try and tackle him, it's hard to bring him down. He's one of the, speaking of ping pong, he played at South Carolina, then he went to USC.
SC to SC.
WSC. Was the runner with Caleb Williams in that Lincoln Riley offense. So he stood out last season to me. I think he only had 820 yards, but he had 13 touchdowns. And he's 5'9", 210, so a little bit on the smaller side, but he's more so a runner than a pass catcher, even at that size. So I would take a swing on Marshawn Lloyd if he's there at some point for the Patriots.
Okay, so I am always intrigued when I put my big board together, and I told you elsewhere, but we'll remind people that haven't listened to all the podcasts. When I put my big board together, it's sort of, get Kuiper's top this, get, 5 or 6 websites. Who do they have as the top 10, 15 running backs? Average them all together. Boom, that's my big board to start from. And then I kind of re-rank them as I watch, and I don't like that guy. I always like when someone's not on my board, and I listed somewhere in the range of 20 something running backs when I did this back in January.
Mm-hmm.
And Tyrone Tracy Jr., not on anybody's list. He was not there. And now I kind of like him, and I think he'd be a really good fit for the Patriots in a lot of ways.
Okay.
Sort of the opposite end of the spectrum from Allen. This is the guy that was at Iowa as a wide receiver for 4 years. And as an Iowa wide receiver, obviously didn't have a ton of production because it's Iowa.
Right.
Transfers to Purdue for a couple of years, moves to running back, 5'11", 209, and had nice production. 716 yards, 8 touchdowns, still caught the ball, 100 and something receptions over his career. I like him. He breaks a lot of tackles. I think he's still learning. And I'll be honest, I don't know what he is. And I don't want to say he's like Debo Jr. or anything like that.
Right. Right.
But I think he has some.
So you'll throw out Emmitt Smith and Derrick Henry, but you won't throw out Deebo Samuel. Okay.
I feel like when I throw those out, people know I'm exaggerating and people know what I'm doing. But if I say Debo, it's so like, I don't know. I feel like people would take that more seriously.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay.
But I do think he has some of that playmaking ability. I think he can line up as a receiver, run routes for you, catch the ball. He breaks a crap ton of tackles, run after catch, run after run,
Yeah.
kind of playmaking ability. He ran a 4.48 40. I don't know if he's a gadget guy. I don't know if he's I mean, you mentioned Patterson earlier, who went from wide receiver to running back at the NFL level. I don't know what exactly Tyrone Tracy is, but I wrote something the other day, sort of the rundown of how I would draft. And later in the draft, I'd be looking for like good football players, tough guys that want to make plays on whatever role they have. He looks like a guy to me that the old Bill Belichick to Julian Edelman. I don't know where we're going to use you, but you look like a good football player. We'll figure it out. I think Tracy can be that.
Well, so that's kind of like Antonio Gibson. So if he comes here and learns from him,
Yep.
Gibson played wide receiver in college and then transitioned to running back. And
Yep.
that tells me that, if you've played wide receiver before, you have good field vision and you know how to work in open space. And you also can catch the ball out of the backfield. So I know gadget player is different than like a pass catching back, because a gadget player, you use them in special teams and things like that, where like, if he can transition into a guy who you can hand the ball to, but then also fling it out to him in the backfield, he has reliable hands and can make guys miss in open space. That works for me. So, all right, fine. I'm sold on him too. I'll give you one more before we go into our, rapid fire honorable mentions, whatever. Jalen Wright from Tennessee, 1,000-yard rusher last season. He also flew at the combine, ran a 4.38, caught 22 balls last season. Watching him, he runs downhill and he's not a pitter patter. He runs with a purpose. And I like guys like that. Like it's one thing to pitter patter and make guys miss all the time, and that's sort of your game. But it's another thing to just do it and not know where you're going. A lot of guys do that. Jalen Wright doesn't. He makes moves when he has to, but otherwise I keep talking about field vision because I think it's crucial as a running back. Like we talk about DeAndre Swift all the time, and he's a guy who is really athletic and can sometimes just make plays, but he also does a lot of stupid stuff. Like he did a lot of stupid stuff when he was with Philly. He did a lot of stupid stuff when he was with Detroit. Now he's on his third team, because I think people see it. It's like, okay, you can't just run into the back of a defender, or you can't just like there's times where he'll just kind of run to the sideline, even though he has a clear lane. Like a guy like Jalen Wright knows how to see the field, knows what he's doing. I keep using run with a purpose. That's what I see with him. Some unnecessary DeAndre Swift slander there. I apologize for that. But needless to say, I like Jalen Wright as a guy who anyone who does that and can, I guess, see a field like that, I think can play on basically day one. And I think Jalen Wright's a guy like that. Not an RB1, not a 300 carry type of guy, but, a spellback or somebody who can take some carries immediately.
Yeah, the thing I wrote next to him, and I don't know if this is even really a thing anymore, but we went through a phase there where a lot of NFL teams were like thunder and lightning.
Yeah.
And he feels like the lightning of a thunder and lightning backfield.
Yeah, definitely.
He runs a little upright. He's got a weird style where he's like chest high when he runs.
Yeah.
But he had a run on one of the things I watched against Georgia where there were like a safety, a linebacker, and a corner that all thought they had him.
Mm-hmm.
And none of them had him. And it was like, and that's Georgia. That's annually one of the best defenses in the country. And he split them and turned on the Jets. As you said, he's a 4-3 type guy. As a lightning or change of pace guy,
yeah,
I think he could absolutely be an immediate impact kind of player in the NFL. Absolutely.
Yeah.
One guy we should probably mention, when I started my big board, he was number one, seen as a number one running back by some. I think NFL.com had him like the third highest grade, but Trey Benson out of
Yeah.
Florida State, went to Oregon before there, split his time. Another 4.3 guy, although I don't really think he plays 4.3, even though that's the 40 he ran at the combine.
I agree.
Couple 900-yard seasons, like solid production, I would say, over the last couple of years. Never been a workhorse. I think I read he only had one career 20 carry game. So is he a lightning guy? Is he a change of pace guy? Or
he only caught 19 passes in his career,
right.
too. So it's kind of like,
he's not really a 3-down back. He's not a passing back. He's fast.
Right.
Is he a combo back? Do you have to pair him with somebody else and kind of split the duties?
Right.
I don't love him. Like he just.
I think he's just pretty good. That's kind of like, I just have good player. Like, okay, we can maybe use you sometime.
College player, and then what is he at the NFL? So I see why he may have been higher sort of coming into the process and maybe a little lower now as people really dig in.
It's another pedigree guy. Florida State has had good backs in the past.
Yep,
the Cook brothers, Devontae Freeman. So like you see it, and it's like, oh, maybe a guy who we can turn into something because he played at Florida State. So
next, another guy I want to mention. I'll leave the New Hampshire guy to use. You like the local guys. Plus, I don't want to take shots at a cult favorite that people seem to like. Ray Davis. Raymond is his real name, I guess. Remahn. But Ray Davis, Kentucky, he was the guy I was talking about. Temple 2 years, Vanderbilt 2 years, Kentucky a year. 4.52, has sort of that traditional, like, stockier back build, a little undersized in terms of height, 5'9". A lot of carries spread among his 5 years of stops along the way. Caught the ball a little bit, couple 1,000-yard seasons. He's caught the ball, so he could be a 3-down back. He's probably like a backup, but I watched him and I was just like, this guy's an NFL running back. I don't know if he's a 2, a 3, like where he fits in, but I just saw a guy that's his build, his style. He finishes runs, breaks tackles, decisive. Like at the very least, I feel like he's a guy that could lead his team in like preseason rushing, like have 200-yard games in the preseason or something like that. And that sticks him around. And then they were like, oh, he's not that bad. He's a pretty good number 2 running back or whatever. So Ray Davis, I kind of like. I guess.
All right. I'll give you 4 rapid fire guys with a quick thought on each. And I'll include the kid from New Hampshire in it because Dylan, is it Lauby? Is that how you say his name?
I don't know. That's why I told you to say it.
He is. He has a cult following around here because he's from UNH. He went to, I believe, the Holy Cross Pro Day. And he was also at the NFL Combine. Like, he's impressive. He's a pass catcher. He's a good runner. Obviously was outstanding at New Hampshire, but, like, it is New Hampshire. And, look, I like him. I would give him a chance. I think it's a player who maybe the Patriots would give a chance. But I'm not, like, necessarily as sold on him as, some other people are around here. And I think that is kind of a New Hampshire bias thing. And that's fine. That's why, like, the Patriots have their local pro day next week or in 2 weeks or whenever it is to kind of give these guys a chance, a look on the NFL stage. And so, look, these were supposed to be quick hitters. I'm kind of getting into the weeds on him, but like he's pretty good. I would give him a chance, but I'm not as sold as everybody else is around here. Bucky Irving from Oregon. His draft stock started to tank a little bit throughout the combine because he was, supposed to be this lightning quick guy and he didn't run too great. A guy who was in Oregon system and played well in Oregon system because that's what happens with guys like that. Take a look at Troy Franklin, take a look at Bo Nix. Isaac Garendo from Louisville on the opposite end of the spectrum from Bucky Irving, tested out of the water at the combine. I have the numbers in front of me because he was first in like 5 categories First in the 40 with a 4.33, first in the vertical jump with a 41-inch vertical, second in the broad jump at 10.9, fourth in the 20-yard shuttle, and fourth in the 3-cone. So freak athlete, put it all together. RAS score, if you're into that kind of thing, of a 9.99 out of 10. So
Anthony Richardson, look out. He's coming for you.
Hey, he was good when he was healthy, but he wasn't very healthy. So we can get into that. Not on this show, but I would give Garendo a chance at some point late because kind of like Theo Johnson with the tight ends. Give me an athlete, give me a good football player. You talked about it. I'll take a chance on him. And then finally, Dylan Johnson, Washington, got hurt before the national championship last season, but killed it in, I believe it was the semifinal. I think he had a really good game. Productive at Washington in a freak offense with Penix and with the 2 or 3 receivers that they have there. So a guy who's done it and had some success in the college ranks. I'd take a chance on him at some point as well. I like a lot of the running backs, but I don't really love any of them.
Yeah. Just as we wrap up your little 4-pack there, the New Hampshire kid, Laube, whatever. Lob. I have no idea.
Loeb.
He's a good college player. Yeah, he's a good college player at a lower level. He looks like an old school Patriot where I feel like if he took the field with Brady and Gronk and Edelman and Welker, he'd be okay. He'd fit in.
He looks like Danny Woodhead.
Well, he's like a mix between Woodhead, Rex, Burkhead, like in that world of, yes, white running backs.
Right.
But to me, go star in the UFL or something. Like, I don't mean that disrespectfully. I don't want to but
right.
Don't know that he's going to be able to replicate his role in his production as a slot receiver the way they used him at UNH. He caught a ton of balls, whatever. Okay, so let's both throw out a running back you think makes sense for the Patriots. I'm going to go back to my guy I said earlier, who I learned and fell in love with, Tyrone Tracy Jr., former Iowa wide receiver. So you got that connection to the program. Even though Bill Belichick's gone, there's still the connection to the program, Kirk Ferentz and everything there. Turned running back at Purdue. I like his versatility. I like his upside. I'm not sure exactly what his role will be, but I think this offense could use him. I'm
going to go with the guy we talked about at first, Blake Corum. I like him.
I like that.
A lot of production. Good player.
Where are you taking him?
4th round, if he's there.
Oh, if they take Blake Corum in the 4th round, I like that pick.
I don't know if he's there. He might be a 3rd round pick, but
sure he will be.
Day 2, 3rd round. But honestly, if they took him in the 3rd round, I don't think I'd hate it either because get a good offensive player and you need help on offense. So give me Blake Corum. He did a lot there, and he's a gamer, like we said. So.
All right, that's going to put the wraps on another 6 Rings Prospect podcast. We talked about the tight end position, which is Brock Bowers and a bunch of also-rans. We talked about the running backs, which is a bunch of also-rans, basically. Patriots, those are positions of sneaky need, we've dubbed them. Some depth on the tight end depth chart, some extra help in the backfield. We will see. You only have so many picks on draft weekend, so you can't fill all the holes, especially when you're a team picking in the top 5 picks of each round. He is Mike Cadlick. I'm Andy Hart. 6 Rings and Football Things, as always, brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Please subscribe. Please download. Please get the Odyssey app. Tell a friend. Spread the word. Hit us up on Twitter or Instagram if you have any questions, because we do our mail.
Give us some ideas too. We got a couple one-off Wednesdays down the pipe. We need some creative thinking from the listeners. So
absolutely. But we will be back next week with another prospect podcast where we'll be talking about the interior offensive and defensive lines. I'll say the fatties in the middle. Okay. Right. Interior O-line, interior D-line up next. Running backs, tight ends in the books. He's Cadlick. I'm Hart. 6 Rings out.
Bye-bye.